we need to ask some questions about what brought us to this conversation in the first place. If we are going to come together, we have to come as equals. We live in a nation that is supposedly built upon the greatest statement of human dignity.
I appreciate these discussions, but as long as we only concentrate on the deep end, we're all in a vicious cycle that was handed to us. We gotta make the proper investments in trauma, mental health, housing, education, and when we do that, we won't have as many of these issues on the deep end. At some point, we gotta stop playing with the symptoms and deal with the root of the problem. Real quickly, and then I'm done. Here's some solid policy that we're working on around policing in New Jersey. One, we're trying to deal with the use of force continuum. And you all have explained how you've worked on that here. But these issues around qualified immunity, one reason there's major distrust is because if something happens to a young black man or woman, there's very little chance someone will be held accountable. That's just the truth. That's why there's distrust. Not even just the way you treat me, but if something goes down, I'm not protected under the law the same way that you are. Something has to happen there. Two, we're working on county level community accountability boards. Like I said, in my situation, most of the issues and the force report showed most of the issues are not taking place exclusively in black neighborhoods. The police departments with the highest use of force rates were in mostly white towns that had proximity to black towns, which bore out my experience growing up. With a county level, a community accountability board, with appointees from justice organizations. So if you have a 7-member board, like the NAACP and other organizations could have appointments to that board, and the county freeholders could have the other appointments. But if black people are disproportionately under the use of force, people of color should be disproportionately on the board, right? We have disproportionate representation in the police force. Let's be intentional and have disproportionate representation for accountability. Until accountability changes, the situation will not change. Third, we have to reimagine public safety. Why are we sending someone out who did not sign up to be a psychologist to a mental health crisis? That is outrageously unfair to law enforcement. Outrageously unfair. And I don't think I'm a pastor. And when I see I'm calling somebody. And so whether it's mental health, whether it's youth involved situations, if it's a drug situation, let's have the proper people on site to deal with it rather than leaving it all up to law enforcement to solve the whole world. And then finally, which is very unpopular, but we have to do something about police unions. Police unions, and this is somebody who is a pretty progressive guy, who I work very closely with unions and all about workers' rights. But if police unions are keeping police from being accountable, that is wrong. That's wrong. I believe in the best package, the best pay, the best health insurance. But if you're saying to me, a police officer just shot somebody and they don't have to talk to anybody for 72 hours and they can all get together and get their story straight, that's wrong. That's wrong. And so until we have transparency, accountability, and until we begin to deal with the root of the problem and not just the symptoms, we will stay in this place. Here's the very last piece that I will give you all, because I speak to the Attorney General in New Jersey regularly. The Attorney General just put out a piece making sure, a directive to make sure that police departments have to report publicly officers that have been disciplined with sanctions of more than 5 days. Common sense, transparency approach, common sense. The police unions have attacked him and have posted his address, his home address, publicly, and he's getting death threats. This is in New Jersey. So let's all be part of the solution. Let's not fight common sense, accountability, because if law enforcement is there to protect and serve, then they should be servants of the community, not lords over it. Thank you.
And it was that black men will do anything to be with white women, black lazy people who just got out of slavery. And what happens is that becomes a multi-generational narrative. And so you look in the movies right now, and when you look on television right now, what do you see? Black folks who are drug dealers, black folks who are rapists, black folks who are doing this. And what happens is that becomes the narrative. And that narrative then gets carried into, many a times, our communities, not because you're bad people. It's because the messages that have been sent to you subliminally over time. If you went through the American educational system, there was never a time, maybe except for February, that you learned anything about black people. And so what happens is when these images get burned in our brain, and then we begin to see it reinforced in the media, and we begin to see it reinforced in our community, and the pictures that they show are in ghettos of drug dealers that are living on the street and not taking care of their families, what happens is sometimes we bring that implicit bias into our interactions. And I sat very quietly for 2 hours because I really wanted to hear your concerns. I really wanted to hear, and what came to me is that it was amazing because Chief Palmer stood up, and out of a shooting that happened in the city of Easton, I forget how long ago it was, we sat down at the table and we created what is called the CIBL, which was an intramural basketball league. As you heard him say, Councilman Brown was a referee, and we ran that for probably 8 years. 8 years, hundreds of kids came through that program. Many of them are playing college basketball right now, college graduates and everything else. But it was because Chief Palmer, and he said he was the only white guy in the room. Now, that wasn't intentional. We invited some other white folks. They just didn't come. But the beauty of it was that we sat down and we came up with something that helped build relationship between community and police officers. And what we found was that the kids who played basketball with those police officers had a greater level of confidence in their interaction going forward. And I think what happens is we don't talk to one another. We don't know one another. You know, a lot of people say, I'm not racist because I got a black friend, right? Well, how many black friends? And would you be okay if your black friend's son dated your white daughter, right? And now all of a sudden it starts getting tense because people get uncomfortable. But it's only because we don't know each other and we don't spend time doing dialogues and having conversations like this that we can see. And I like what Chief Palmer, are you still here, Chief, or did he have to leave? Yeah, Chief Palmer said, these are some nice guys, right? But there's a whole lot of nice guys in our community. And there's a whole lot of nice guys in your community. But the problem is the narrative and the message that has been sent to you is that the majority of us are what the narrative has painted us to be. And so therefore, we can't be trusted. That's why black men are, 8 times more likely in the state of Pennsylvania to be arrested for marijuana. Because if we have marijuana, we're doing something wrong. But Brad, who lives up in Forks, can smoke marijuana, he's not doing anything wrong. So the problem is that narrative and the implicit bias that we bring to the conversation. So I appreciate Chief Scalzo, and I'm done, who says we're doing training, but you can't train out implicit bias. And it's very hard to do online. Because when you begin to talk about this kind of stuff, it gets tense. Because you know what? You may be saying, yeah, that guy's telling some truth, but we know what we deal with every day on the street, right? So then there's this whole idea of pushback. So there has to be a longer, more intense conversation about how we change the narrative. Because, you know, they said Michael Brown, I think he said, looked like he had a demon in his eyes or something like that. The kid was just walking in the street on his way home. But the officer's response is that he was demonic. And then the young man who got shot when his car broke down in the road, the guys in the helicopter said, oh, he looks like a bad dude. His car broke down. He just needed to have his tire changed. And he ended up dying on the side of the road. Right? And so the narrative continues to play over in our mind. And if we're not careful, that becomes the driver of our interactions. And ultimately it ends up dividing us as humanity, and it causes greater and deeper problems. So I really hope that we can continue to talk and dialogue about how we can close down some of these racial barriers and continue to walk together. I'm always grateful to Chief Scalzo. If I ever had a problem, I'm going to give him a call because we have a relationship. But there is so much more to do, and I'm grateful to DA Terry Houck, again, for having the foresight to call us together, and I'll turn it back over to the leading team.
Thank you, Pastor. We know that your jobs are tough. We know that some of you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. You won't say it, but we know it. So whatever we can do to help you, to assist you in any way, we want you to know that, okay? And we want to have more of these conversations. I want to invite Terry up. Terry, would you please come? Because from here on out, what we want to do is start developing plans and programs and strategies on how to continue this conversation. We don't just want this to be a one-off. We want this to be a model for the rest of Pennsylvania. The people in this room are some wonderful people. Wonderful people. You guys, like I said, you guys' jobs are very tough. And so there's a lot of brain power in this room. I know that we can put together plans and programs and strategies to improve police community relations throughout Pennsylvania. I believe that it starts right here and it starts today. Terry?
Thank you, Owen. Listen, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. When Kerry called me about this, to do this, and Kerry's the one that started this, he called me. I had a lot of reservations about it, being a former officer myself, and just the way that you guys are getting hammered. But we sat down, we talked about it, and this is exactly the way I envisioned it. I wasn't sure it would happen like this, but and I wasn't at all sure that I would get the response from you men and women that I got. So I just want to, we'll keep this conversation going. If you guys have anything you want to add to this, you know you can get my email. You know I'm depending on you guys as I've been communicating since January, since I've been in office, and I'm a lot more communicative with you guys. So I want you to know that you can email me anytime, call me anytime with any issues. But I just wanted to thank you, really thank you. Even though I got the commitment from every one of you, I still was holding my breath today, thinking, man, I hope they come, and you did. You came in force. I just want to say thank you.